And welcome back. Now, the inaugural Group of 20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting will be held for the next 3 days in Cape Town in the Western Cape. And this gathering happens as corruption continues to undermine global integrity and also here at home robs South Africa of its resources in both the public and private sector. Now, in his State of the Nation address that was held last month, President Cyril Ramaphosa indicated that over 10 billion rand has been recovered in state capture-related cases by the Special Investigating Unit and the Asset Forfeiture Unit. Now, also that progress is being made in the implementation of the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, including the signing into law of several legislative reforms. But to talk to us more about the impact of corruption and the inaugural G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting, we joined virtually now by Karam Singh, who's Executive Director at Corruption Watch. Karam, good to have you with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be on your program.
Now, Karam, for years we've spoken about the impact of corruption on not just the economic system, the public service, as we see service delivery suffering, the crippling of our public health service and education, and we can go on and on listing them. But how significant is this week's G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group in highlighting and, I suppose more importantly, finding solutions to this scourge, not just in South Africa, but globally?
Yeah, no, I think this meeting is an incredible opportunity. The G20 brings together the world's most powerful countries in a alliance where they're able to speak around a range of issues. As you've been, reporting from the last week, we've had the meeting of the finance ministers, a meeting of, other officials from foreign affairs. Corruption is not a uniquely South African problem. It's not a uniquely African problem. It's a global problem. It's a problem that faces humanity in the same way that climate change and inequality, challenge us as a global community. The only way we're going to defeat corruption or at least get some gains in terms of the fight against corruption is through international cooperation, is through agreements with the major powers that we're going to stand against kleptocracy. We're going to build a global system which is resistant to money laundering. We're going to fight for democracy and democratic rights, which get undermined by corruption. So, the Anti-Corruption Working Group's been in place since 2010. It really is a incredible opportunity for South Africa to be hosting, and I think that's quite significant as well. And we can reflect in terms of where we are in our progress in South Africa in the fight against corruption, and also say that it's been incredibly challenging, and reversing state capture and ensuring that we have accountability for what happened under state capture is still something that we still very much grappling with as a country here in South Africa.
Brings us to the power of perceptions then, Karam, and perhaps perception and reality, because what is the perception of South Africa and South Africans in particular around corruption, and how it has affected them vis-a-vis the reality of this?
Yeah, well, I think the messages that you've been getting throughout the morning is indicative of the perceptions of the general public. I think the general public feels incredibly frustrated. I think people that are responsible, people that are dependent upon social services know that we have a situation where the health sector is under pressure, the education sector is under pressure, local government is under significant pressure, and that one of those pressure points is bad governance, maladministration, fraud, and the infiltration of organized crime and systemic fraud into these sectors. So there's no doubt in South Africa that the broad perception is that we're not winning the fight against corruption, that prosecutions are too slow, and that we see officials operating with impunity. In terms of the global perception, we have the Corruption Perceptions Index that Transparency International releases annually. And that shows a real stagnating score for South Africa, that it's kind of a case of one step forward, two steps back. And I think we can look to the Zondo Commission as a success, anti-corruption success in terms of transparency, in terms of telling us what happened. But as your viewers have said, we've seen so little accountability. We even see principal actors who were responsible for state capture sitting in Parliament, unprosecuted, and I think that's an incredible frustration for the public.
So where does the answer lie? Because we had this commission that cost over R1 billion, but then, of course, we heard in his State of the Nation address last month, President Cyril Ramaphosa indicating that the SIU and the Asset Forfeiture Unit reported that they've recovered over R10 billion as a result of state capture-related cases. So one would say that then offsets it and it justifies the cost. Many people were worried about the cost of that Zondo Commission. But is the country turning the tide? And what seems to be the problem in prosecuting high-profile people in South Africa?
Well, we have a national anti-corruption strategy. We now have a National Advisory Council Against Corruption that's mandated by the president to help implement the national anti-corruption strategy. So that has multiple pillars, and I think we can see some progress. As you've said, we've seen progress on asset recovery. We've seen progress in terms of the progress generally of SIU-led investigations. We've seen progress in terms of the discussion around the need for enhanced whistleblower protection and support. We've seen new legislation that deals with the public procurement system, although we don't think that that's gone far enough. In terms of prosecuting these cases, it's clear that the NPA has battled with capacity issues. There are challenges in terms of the complexity of these cases. Also, we know that the criminally accused, as we've seen in the case of former President Jacob Zuma, have used tactics to delay these cases, for years now, in terms of, not seeing the cases go to resolution. So there clearly are these blockages and challenges, particularly within the prosecution services, that makes prosecutions not a low-hanging fruit, not a quick win. So, we need a multi-pronged approach. Prosecutions isn't the only game in town. Asset recovery is absolutely critical, and we need to build stronger institutions that can avoid being captured in the future. And we've advocated strongly for the need for a dedicated anti-corruption agency that can help drive these issues, so we don't need another Zondo Commission, 5-10 years down the line. So it's complicated, Sakina. There's no silver bullet. There's no single answer. But, we've come up with, there's lots of innovative approaches, including dedicated anti-corruption courts, including a dedicated international anti-corruption court that could really assist global cooperation and, a dedicated, focused fight against grand corruption, kleptocracy, and state capture, which we know hijacks the democratic promise.
But how are we supposed to end all of that, the kleptocracy, the corruption and everything else, the sort of wholesale malfeasance that we see, if we are not dealing with the prosecutorial end of things, Karam? Because people want to see, they need to see justice being done. You spoke about the recovery of assets, which is great because it should be, paid back to the state. But if people are not getting prosecuted, you take, for example, the SASSA SRD grants. 2023-2024 financial year, 1,145 cases identified. Now, if you can't follow through on something like that, how then should we expect you to follow through on, big fish, so to speak, who have the money, who have the resources and the capacity to actually buy perhaps their way out of sticky situations? Surely something needs to be done. And if we can't deal with the small fry, how are we going to deal with the big fish?
You've made a really compelling argument, Sakina, of the real challenges we have within the prosecution services, whether it be going after so-called petty corruption, going after these. I mean, there's such a deep accountability deficit. If you look at the charges Jacob Zuma's facing in terms of the Thales case, I mean, this is way before state capture. This goes back to the era of President Thabo Mbeki. You know, we haven't seen any accountability for the arms deal. We haven't seen significant state capture prosecutions. So the prosecution service absolutely needs to drive home prosecutions. Otherwise, you know, there's this whole issue about what is the state of the rule of law? Where is the deterrence? We see increasingly kind of brazen criminal activity linked to trying to stifle corruption investigations, the whistleblowers being, you know, assassinated in broad daylight, and then we don't see people brought to book. So I think you're absolutely right. It's an Achilles heel. It's also linked to the challenges within the reform of the South African police service, the fact that we are able to have effective investigations that then lead to successful prosecutions. So there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be fixed if we're going to feel that we're moving in the right direction, that we have a good trajectory. This is also, you know, one of the big issues when it came to South Africa being grey listed. And one of the issues which is inhibits South Africa getting off the grey list quickly is the lack of prosecutions. So I don't want to undersell it. I think you've made a compelling argument of why it needs to be fixed. But I think, you know, prosecutions is just part of the basket of reforms that we need. We need an ethical public service. We need lifestyle audits, which are transparent. We need a public procurement system, which is transparent, which we can interrogate. And we need a much more enhanced whistleblower protection system, so there isn't this chilling environment, because this is also one of the big cultural challenges that we face, is people's reticence when it comes to coming forward with information about corruption.
Indeed. And, you know, if you look at President Ramaphosa also commenting on government finalizing the whistleblower protection framework and introducing the whistleblower protection bill in Parliament during this financial year, which is absolutely crucial. But the very infamous case now of Babita Deokaran and how she was gunned down as a whistleblower. You've got the Sfiso Zulu case, where again, you know, it's been in the public, Karam, in the public sphere, where you have a whistleblower who struggled to get protection from the state. So how does that encourage others to do the right thing and blow the whistle on corruption? But if you can also just very briefly, in the interest of time, also just reflect on the role of corporate South Africa in combating but also enabling corruption.
Absolutely. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around professional enablers, whether it be auditing firms, whether it be law firms who facilitate corruption, transnational corruption. There's a big issue around money laundering and what are the obligations of the banks in terms of ensuring that they enforce proper money laundering legislation. These are big gaps within the enforcement framework. One of the priorities of the G20 talks about this need for inclusive participation, and this also finds expression in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy in terms of an all-of-society approach, so that you know, it's not going to be just government that's going to deliver a corruption-free future for us, but there's a huge role to play from the private sector, both in terms of ensuring ethical conduct, that they're ethical service providers. We've talked about the need for integrity pacts, particularly when it comes to bidding on big construction projects. But certainly, you know, it's not clear to me that the penny is sufficiently dropped for the financial industry when it comes to the absolutely critical role that they have to play when it comes to fighting money laundering. There's no way that we can talk about tens of billions of rands flowing out of the country as a result of corrupt and fraudulent transactions without some kind of complicity or negligence on behalf of financial institutions. So there needs to be much stronger cooperation between the financial intelligence centers, which all of the G20 countries have, and the major banks when it comes to these issues as well.
Karam, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. Karam Singh, Executive Director at Corruption Watch, talking to us about some of the issues that will take a central focus at the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting that's being held in Cape Town starting today until Wednesday, and also just looking generally at tackling corruption in South Africa.